You can just remind me as I proceed so that we could add new members.
Okay, sir.
All right. So looking at preventing fire accidents at home. Many a times we pay attention to, like Bayo said, we pay attention to preventing fire accidents in the workplace, but we pay very little attention when it comes to domestic fires. We pay all the attention when it's an industry or a commercial sector or commercial setting, but we kind of ignore this or look past this when it comes to our homes or our places of residence. Now, the first question, I believe we all know what fire is, but for the purpose of this gathering, of this lecture, I'll still go ahead to give a simple definition of what fire really is. Over here, I defined fire as a chemical reaction in which energy in the form of heat is produced. A chemical reaction in which energy in the form of heat is produced. There's also another definition which says it can be defined as a rapid oxidation process. And you would agree with me that to have fire, there are major elements that must combine, whether it's in an industrial setting or in the domestic setting. Three major elements have to come together to have a fire. And these elements are oxygen, fuel, and source of ignition. Now, possibility for all of this is very, very evident in our home. We have oxygen. Oxygen makes up about 20.8% of our atmosphere, of our natural atmosphere. So in our homes, we already have oxygen. We have different forms of fuels in our homes. We have our cooking gas, we have our kerosene, we have wood, firewood, and several forms of fuels in our homes. And in our kitchen, we cook with open flames from our burners, gas burners or stoves. So possibility of having an inferno in the home is very, very high if care is not taken. And that is the reason why we have to look at this. Now, statistics from the National Bureau of Statistics shows that in 2014, there were 64,000 domestic fires in Nigeria. Now imagine 64,000. And of these 64,000 domestic fires, it led to the death of 94,000 persons and loss of property worth over 1 billion naira.
Mr. Tosin, please.
So you can see, I'm looking at the statistics from the National Bureau of Statistics. Now, over 1 billion naira was lost to fire, domestic fires. Now, imagine if that 1 billion naira was still in the economy, how much good it could have done. 94,000 lives were lost. So this tells us that we cannot downplay domestic fires anymore. It's something that we have to pay critical attention to. Like I said initially, that to have a fire, there's a triangle. I will not want to overflog that. There's a triangle which we in industrial safety, we call the fire triangle, right? And it has to do with the interaction of oxygen, fuel, and source of ignition. And looking at these three elements, in our homes, we have our cooking gases that we use, we have our petrol, we have our cooking oil, we have paper, we have wood, we have electricity, we have clothes. All of these are readily available in the home, right? I don't think there's any home where you don't have at least one of these elements or one of these items. We have 20.8% of oxygen in the atmosphere. We have open flames in the home. And all of these, when they come together, definitely there'll be a fire. Now, to break this down, I want us to look at high-risk areas in the home. High-risk areas in the home. Now, you agree with me that one of the high-risk area, I will even put it as number one, is the kitchen. Is the kitchen. So I itemize high-risk areas here as the kitchen, generator houses, or where we put our generating sets, electrical connections, and circuits or appliances, then others. Okay, now looking at the kitchen. So a great number of fire incidents in our homes originates from the kitchen. Now, what can be done in order not to be a victim? Now, I itemized some do's and some don'ts in order to prevent kitchen fires. Now, number one on my list here is don't put your cylinders in your kitchen. Your cooking gas cylinders. Please do not put it in your kitchen. Have it outside, maybe in your veranda, and connect a hose into your kitchen. Right? Inspect your cylinders routinely. Now, one thing you could do, and this is one thing I do as a practice when I go out to fill my gas, is that I tell them to inspect the cylinder for leaks, for possible leaks, because you might not know, your cylinder might be having a little leak from the gauge or from the valve rather. And if that happens, it could be very, very dangerous. Inspect your hose at intervals. Ensure that the hose link to your cooking burner is well tied. That is well tied. If it's not well tied, then there could be possibility of leaks. Do not place. Now, I've told you that you should have your cylinders outside your kitchen. But another mistake that we could make is to have the cylinder outside the kitchen, but directly under the sun. That is another risk. When the cylinder is overheated, it could explode. So, if the design of your house does not allow you to have, does not allow for a shade, then I would advise you probably build a shade for the cylinder so that it's not directly under the sun. Do not place cooking oils close to open flames. Now, your oil, your palm oil, your soya oil, your groundnut oil, do not place it close to open flames, because you will agree with me that even your cooking oil is a fuel. And if it's, you can see some of the pictures here. I think someone was frying something, right? And it got overheated and there was a fire. So you agree with me that even your cooking oil is a fuel. Now, another mistake that we make is that at times when we cook or when we fry things, is that we do not pay attention. So you leave what you are doing in the kitchen and you go outside to maybe engage in a discussion. And the cooking pan or cooking device becomes overly heated, and this could lead to a fire. So when you cook, you have to closely monitor what it is you are cooking, so it does not become burnt and lead to a domestic fire. Are we all following?
Yes, we are following. We are following.
Do we have more guests to add?
Yeah, now I've reclaimed the host and I'm adding them now, so you can continue with the screen. I think yeah, very well.
Okay. So after the kitchen, the next item or hotspot area is our generator houses. Now, some of the do's and don'ts as regards the generator house have been itemized here, and I'll quickly run through all of these and maybe throw some light on it as I proceed. I said here, ensure combustible materials or flammable liquids and gases are not kept close to generator set. That's the typo error. Ensure combustible materials and flammable liquids are not kept close to generator set. Do not refuel your generator set while the engine is running. Some years back, a colleague, when I was still in Lagos, shared an incident with me. That actually happened. He shared this incident when we were having our 2-bus talk. And he said one of his neighbors, he was using this small generator, the one we call I Better Pass My Neighbor. And I think the gen was showing signs that he had to refuel it. And quickly, he just took his jar of petrol and started turning it into the generator set. And there was a serious fire, and the guy got seriously burnt. And this is a lesson for all of us, that it's an unsafe practice. It is a wrong practice to refuel your generator when it is on. You know, there's this temptation when you are watching your favorite program. For the ladies, maybe Telemundo, watching your favorite program on Telemundo, and you see that the gen is showing signs of going off, and you quickly rush, before the thing off, I beg, pour fuel. And if you do that, there could be a fire. The right thing to do is to put off the generator set allow it to cool down for a few minutes, maybe 3 to 5 minutes before you top it with fuel, right? Because when the gen is heated still and you pour fuel into it, if the petrol comes in contact with the engine of the generator, there could also be a fire. So allow the generator set to cool off for a few minutes before you refuel it, right? Then also follow the recommendation of the manufacturer. Now, if you go through the manual of all generator sets, there's a recommendation from the manufacturer rather, on when to service your generator set. Please follow this strictly, right? In this part of the world, we like to boycott processes. So when a manufacturer says service maybe after 30 days or after 2 months, we want to use this for about 6 months before we service, right? When you do this, there's a likelihood of the generator malfunctioning, and this could also lead to a fire. So let's follow recommendations as prescribed by the manufacturer. Now, do not overload your circuit, your electrical circuits, with several gadgets. Don't overload it. When you overload a circuit, there's a likelihood that that circuit will become overheated. That electrical outlet will become overheated. When it is overheated, there could be a fire. A while back, I and some friends were living together, and on where we're living, the building, after the incident, we noticed that there was an issue from our investigation. And what we discovered was that at a point, the electrical cables were becoming overheated. One of the reasons for this was because it was done by a quack, and it was overheated. Over time, the cables, there was now a breach. The neutral and the live breached together, and there was a serious fire, electrical fire. We quickly had to isolate the whole system, to turn the whole system off so that it will become very, very serious. So when you overload circuits, right, with more load than required, the system could become overheated and there could be a fire. When quacks do electrical installation for you, because they don't follow necessary requirements on ensuring that the rating of the cable is suitable for the load that you want to put on it, or the rating of the electrical fittings are suitable for the load that will be put on it. And when all of these are not followed, then we could have a fire. When you leave in your house, ensure you put off your electrical appliance. If you are going to be away for a long time, please put off your electrical appliances. Now, one of the things that we must note is, should you have an electrical fire in your house, right? Fire from an electrical source in your house. One of the things you should do, the thing you should do first is to de-energize. Say you have an electrical socket that showed signs of overheating and maybe bringing smoke. The first thing you ought to do is turn off that socket and maybe go to your breaker and turn off your breaker to isolate that system, right? So please let's take this and put this in mind. Anytime or anywhere you notice an overheating electrical system, de-energize that system, quickly turn it off, remove it from source of power, turn off your circuit breaker. I'll share this experience, right? When I was much younger, in my parents' house, on this fateful day at night, we had a candle on the bed, the head of the bed, and we were actually reading with the candle. Then we slept off. I and my siblings, we slept off, and the candle was still on. In the middle of the night, my mom rushed into our room and started waking all of us. What happened? The room was filled with smoke. What happened was the candle was on the head of the bed, and the head of the bed was wooden. When the candle burnt out, it started burning the head of the bed, the wood. And this led to the issue we had. Now, if my mom hadn't woken up earlier, probably I would not be here speaking with us today. So if you're going to use a candle, if you have to use a candle, but I would strongly recommend that you don't use a candle, right? But if you have to use a candle, ensure it is on a candle stand. Ensure it is on a candle stand. And even if it's on a candle stand, when you want to sleep, if there's a possibility that you will sleep off, that candle should not be close to you. Because I've heard stories of people sleeping off, even though the candle was on a candle stand or on a material that was not combustible. While they were sleeping, they slept off and probably hit the candle while sleeping, and the candle fell on the bed, and it was not a pleasant story for them or anyone. So please ensure you put your candle away from you. You put your candle away from you and let it be on a candle stand. And but I would strongly recommend that we use rechargeable lamps. They are very, very cheap now, and you can get it anywhere. Now, for those of you that are building your house or you intend building your own house, there are certain things that you must consider when designing your home. There are safety factors that we have to consider with respect to fire safety when designing our homes. Now, build-up of heat over time could lead to fires. So I'll recommend that in your kitchens, you have a heat extractor, right? I'll recommend that you install a smoke detector in your house, preferably in the kitchen, just a smoke detector. So if there's a fire, or maybe somewhere close to the kitchen, not maybe directly in the kitchen, but somewhere close to the kitchen. So if there's a fire, you could be notified, right? I would recommend that you have an ELCB installed, an earth leakage circuit breaker installed in your house. So when there's a short circuit, it trips off the whole electrical system and you don't have an electrical fire. I recommend that you install a gas leak detector in your house. So when you have leaks from your cooking gas, it alarms you, it notifies you that there's a leak somewhere, and you can go further to investigate. Now, your house should be designed, like I said earlier, your house should be designed in a manner that allows for your cooking gas cylinder to be placed outside your kitchen, and for it to be properly shaded also from elements of weather, the sun and the rain. I'll recommend that cables and electrical fittings are rated for the load that you intend it for. I'll recommend that you don't store trash in your garage, right? A lot of people store trash in their garage. When you store trash, those solid materials are also fuels. So when there's a little ignition, it could ignite on those materials that you've stored, those trash that you stored in your garage, and there could be a fire. I'll recommend that in building your house, you give room for proper ventilation. So have good windows, enough windows. Don't minimize space, enough windows for proper ventilation. When there is proper aeration, the likelihood of buildup of gas, even if there's a leak, is going to be very, very low, because when there's ventilation, even if there's a leak, the gas leak is going to escape. It's going to escape from the kitchen to the environment, and this will not give room for a level of buildup that will lead to a fire. So have windows, enough windows in your house. Let the window in your kitchen be big enough, the one in your sitting room, and in other areas of your house. I recommend that you have at least 2 exit doors in your home. At least 2 exit doors. So in case of a fire, if one entrance is being affected, you have another escape route, right? It's always good to be prepared, just in case. Now, how to use a fire extinguisher? Now, we've talked about prevention, but in case of eventuality, we also need to know how to use a fire extinguisher. In every home, I recommend that you have a fire extinguisher. At least have a fire extinguisher. And you should have a fire extinguisher that can fight multiple fires, right? So I would not recommend that you have a fire extinguisher that is water-based. I recommend that you have one that can fight both fires from liquid fuels, or fire from gaseous fuels, or fire from solid fuels, right? And a good fire extinguisher for this is actually the dry chemical powder, right? Although most people don't like having this because it could generate a lot of dirt that is difficult to clean afterwards. but this extinguisher is actually very, very good for almost any kind of fire. And some people recommend the use of CO2 extinguishers, but in my experience professionally, I've seen that the DCP extinguisher is much more effective than the CO2 extinguisher. You can quote me anywhere. DCP is much more effective than CO2 extinguisher. About a month ago, I did a training with some of the people at work, and in trying to experiment this, we started the fire and we used CO2 on the fire using petrol. Before the CO2 could extinguish this fire, it took several minutes, but using DCP, within few seconds, it could extinguish the fire. So in my practice, I recommend CO2. But for your kitchen, it might be good to have a foam-based fire extinguisher, in your kitchen. But in other areas where you have your generator set, it's good you have a DCP fire extinguisher. Now, how do you use your fire extinguisher? There's a simple acronym that we in the safety profession use, and that is PASS. P-A-S-S. P-A-S-S. And what does PASS mean? Yes. What does PASS mean? The P in PASS means pull the pin. For every fire extinguisher, there's a pin, right? And that PASS tells us, okay, let me play again. Pull the pin. The next thing you have to do is A, which is to aim at the base of the fire. Now, some people, when fighting fires, instead of aiming at the base of the fire, they aim at the surface of the fire, at the top of the fire. If you aim at the top of the fire, you will not achieve anything, right? So you have to aim at the base of the fire, the roots of the fire. Then the next thing you have to do is to squeeze the lava. You squeeze the lava. And the last S means sweep. So while you squeeze the lava, you sweep. You sway a little to the right, a little to the left, a little to the right, a little to the left, in order to fight the fire. Like I said earlier, that you have different categories of fire extinguishers. But it said here that combination extinguishers are the best. That's extinguishers that can fight more than one type of fire. And an extinguisher that can fight more than one type of fire, you see on it to be written ABC. ABC, showing that it can fight more than one type of fire. And when you want to get a fire extinguisher for your home, I would recommend that you get extinguishers that are rated to be able to fight more than one type of fire. Okay, I'm going to play another video, and this is just one of the ways we can fight fires in our home from our gas cylinders, from our cooking gas. So just watch this. It's a very, very simple technique. Watch again. Now, that looks very, very simple, but it's one of the very easy ways we can combat fire in our houses. Now, what the lady did over there was what we call smoldering. What she did was she isolated the fire from oxygen. You know, I told you initially at the beginning that 3 major elements have to come together for you to have a fire. Fuel. The cooking gas is the fuel. The butane gas is the fuel. The next one, ignition source or heat source. The ignition source was the candle. The third one is oxygen, which is readily available in the environment. So what she did was cut off one of the supplies, cut off one of the major elements, breaking the triangle. And in doing that, the fire was extinguished. So I'm not telling you to go and experiment that to leave your gas running and to ignite it. What I'm saying is, should it happen, your cooking gas cylinder, be too scared. Don't be in a panic. Just get something that is big enough and wrap that cylinder. There's a possibility that you are going to isolate oxygen from the chain and the fire will be extinguished. And you see how she did it. She did it immediately. You don't have to do it slowly. Once you do it and you cut off the chain. Thank you. So I think with 2 tips, we've gotten 1 or 2 things or information on how to battle domestic fires. Any questions?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Lawal Tosin. It was really an enlightening one, especially for we, the new ones who are yet to understand what safety really is. I could remember an experience that I had concerning fire when I was called. I was at home. I think it was during the fasting period. I just finished breaking my fast too. I was about eating the real meal. Then they all came into my house. Uncle Wali, fire. I said, what? Am I a fire marshal? Am I a fire brigade? What's that? Why are you shouting fire? Because they knew that I was a safety person. On getting to the scenario, we were able to execute the fire. But something happened. Something really intriguing happened when this issue of fire started. When the fire started, there was a fault. And the fault was that the gas cylinder they were using was not good. There was a leakage, and they knew, but they were trying to manage. And that's one of the mistakes we used to have. Whenever we see a fault in our gas cylinder, in our cooking gas, we should repair them immediately. Now, that was the first error. Now, listen to this. It's very interesting. Now, when the gas brought up the fire, the fire was there. We call it jet fire. In process safety, it's called jet fire. When the jet fire started, then the father, who is the breadwinner of the family, that doesn't understand safety, immediately the next idea was, when we see fire, we quench it with water. So immediately he took water and poured it on the fire. And another mistake is that you don't use water to extinguish gas fire. There are kind of fire that you can use your water for. Then automatically what happened? The fire increased and everywhere was filled with fire because they used water. They didn't understand these basic things, and that's why we are having this kind of discussion to enlighten us. Now, upon doing that, the jet increased everywhere. Every angle caught fire, and every other places were burning. So that was the second error. Now the third error again was that when they're not like, okay, they've understood, like the video they showed us, that they use a bucket to cover the gas, to cover the cylinder. Now they understood that lightly, not completely, because it has to cover it completely.
Completely.
Now, the fire was much, they couldn't use a small bucket. Now they now went to take all these big drums that is fetching water. And mind you, the big drum they are using is not even. So when they thought that they've covered the fire. But
there are still spaces for oxygen to get in.
They were still going in. And before they knew it, even the plastic that they thought, the big drum, out there, and increased the fire. It was a serious thing. It was all burning the whole building. But thank God that it was not a roofing, it was a decking. So there was still a level of protection. Assuming it was directed to the roof, it would have gotten the ceiling and the fire will have
spread. Yeah.
So now all these things are very, very important. If we are using, you have feature of gas, what you do is you use water. Sorry, what you do is that
no water.
You get a fire extinguisher. That is the first thing. You don't use water to extinguish gas fire. It's very, very, very important. And there are other things that
and advice for gas fire. For gas fires, specifically for gas fires, I recommend you use DCP.
Yes. So for gas fires, as he has said, use DCP. But one issue that most times people used to have with some professionals used to have with DCP is that for your cylinder, it's good, it's good. but most times the chemicals affect it affects the equipment. But for your home, I think the extinguishing the fire is more important than any other thing.
It's more important.
Most of us don't have fire extinguisher at home. We are thinking like, it's very expensive, but the cost of having a fire accident is more than the cost of getting a fire extinguisher. So everybody that is here, let us try as much as possible to get a fire extinguisher. And our home at design stage,